Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you're doing well, and I want to thank you for showing me love and supporting me. I appreciate that. And I'm back to show you some love and on my part as well. So let's talk today a little bit about animal communication. Animal communication is a signal-based communication, mind to mind, a sensory communication, and it's based on telepathy. Telepathy is a very old word, which actually means mind to mind thought transference. And if you were to look at your Google or any of your authority based search engines, sources of information that people rely upon and cite today in some capacity as their research, which is always kind of flabbergasts me, you would see that telepathy has never been completely supported by modern science, and that would be a load of bullocks. Because since people have been land based on particular land masses and then reset, like the current Great Reset, like the postcards I put together in 2020 and mailed out and delivered to people. To be aware of the Great Reset, you have to understand what the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and the globalist agenda have in mind. And that is brain machine interface. You already know about Neuralink for quite a long time, I'm sure, since at least 2019. But there's also something called Mind Portal and Mind Sweep, and there's actually other programs which are meant to interface with your brain, and the purpose of which, and this is important to telepathy and animal communication, exceptionally important right now at this time in 2024, as my grandmother warned about with me in 73, because first you're being trained, then you're being tracked, then some of us are being targeted, and ultimately it is for firms like the UK, for America, for other countries that are a part of and not a part of the Commonwealth to be able to trade the human animal herd as chattel. You produce energy, you produce data in the form of experiments, medical experiments, especially injections, pills, potions, drinks, products of all kinds. And AI has been around for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. I really have no idea, but it's been around for quite a long time because my grandfather knew about it way back. He was an Army military police in the start, in 1942 transferred out to California when my mother was born, and wore the patch with the black widow spider on it on his arm as part of his issued military uniform. So there's a difference between communication. I made a little note here because I didn't want to forget this part. There's a difference between communication and communion. And communication is rational and verbal. If you look it up in the authority based structures that inform us and basically train us, like I just alluded to or spoke about. And there's a difference between communion, which is mind to mind, intuitive, and deep sensory ability. It's a signal sending ability, something that I have demonstrated between Minnesota and a woman in Africa who has had great stomach pain. And I messaged her on Facebook and I said, "Why is my stomach hurting?" I've had a lot of, symbiotic type experiences with people I know, never even met in person, like this young woman who was actually training to be a Sangoma, which is a shaman in African terminology. And she said, "I don't know how you do that, but that's just wild. I can't believe it. But yes, I do." And I said, "Close your eyes. I'm going to do some energy work for you from a distance. I don't do Reiki. I never went and got training aside from what my grandmother taught me. I never wanted to." And so she said, "My stomach ache is gone. Thank you so much." So whether it was psychosomatic, mind over matter, or it really worked, who knows? But I'm just thankful that it happened for her. So let's move into animals. Wolf, over here, I'll kind of move to the side, has always been my kindred animal since at least the age of 4 when I did my first astral traveling and left my body. And I would have 1, 2, or 3 wolves on the side of my bed at night when I went to sleep. And they took me out up through the walls and out. And that'll be on another video about my first astral traveling and then a lifetime of it. Lots of travel. And so wolf has pretty much always been the number one kindred along with crow and raven for me because crow and raven speak for wolf. Now, a lot of this is known in native culture, and a lot of this was known in many, many, many indigenous cultures. But because of what I started off the video talking about, the resets that happen periodically, cyclically, and predictably, they use people for a targeted purpose. And it's a human herd. We're a bioengineered animal. So that's what they use us for. So communication is rational and verbal. We'll go back to that. And communion is sensory. That's why back in the 60s, when I started learning, my grandmother referred to everything as ESP, extrasensory perception. So when I first discovered animal communication and what it was with my grandmother, of course, and I was under the age of 10, and I was taking care of two chow chow dogs, Red and Pee Wee, and they were red in color, and one was a blue black. Pee Wee was the female. And I was in charge of combing out their fur, which with a stainless steel comb, which was quite a job, with sitting down with a bag for about an hour each dog, about once a week or once every 2 weeks, and then cleaning up after their mess in the backyard, giving them food and water. And I took that chore on, quite young, and I learned a lot from them. I learned to communicate with them, but then I really stepped up animal communication, which is simply loving and connecting on a mental, empathic, compassionate level. You will know because the animal will look at you and it will make a connection. I'm trying to make sure I'm also facing you in the camera here. And it will acknowledge, it understands that you're able to make a transmission, receipt and transmission of communication. English, or word sound power, end glitch, is a sentencing and spelling propaganda that is basically causes you to have to formulate grammar structure and sentencing and spelling structure to some extent in your head, which takes time and it occupies a lot of your RAM, so it slows you down. So it was necessary by the powers that be that created this particular reset that we're in to cause you to have to use a guttural formulation of language, land gauge, language, word sound power. That's why I put that in there on occasion. So, but it was when my mother brought home the monkeys in my probably 11, 12, 13-year-old age that they had spider monkeys and woolly monkeys, and they said, don't touch the spider monkeys. They're wild. They'll bite you. And I remember going over to the cages and eventually letting a couple of them out. And eventually my mother let them loose in a screened-in patio. We had passion flowers outside in the backyard. This was growing up in San Jose, California, which went from the Valley of Heart's Delight to San Jose to Silicon Valley, where agriculture and tech replaced agriculture. So it's really with the monkeys that I began to learn. And I know that there's no course you need to take. There's no money you need to pay. There's no special gifts that you need to have. You just need to have love in your heart and the ability to want to communicate. That really is all it is. And time to develop and practice. Time to develop and practice. That's it. I've lived with a wolf dog for over 12 years, and before that in the 1980s for many, many, many years. Exceptionally high intelligence animals. That's why I've got the white one here. She reminds me so much of Luna Avalon Blackfoot. And I just want to share with you that you can animal communicate. Anyone can animal communicate. You can use telepathy. But what has been used against you, which actually circumvents the better ability to have really nice, clean telepathy, is the use of aluminum and mercury. And those are two things that I test for on the HTMA. The hair tissue mineral analysis looks to see, like, I need potassium right now, and I need adrenal complex, and I need some vitamin B6, and I take zinc every day. It's going to tell you as a unique person-centered individual exactly what you need so that you can help yourself to mobilize and move a lot of these metals. There's a lot of young men in their 20s and 30s and even younger that since that birth control pill came out, like I talked about in yesterday's video, I hope you go watch it, the psychic medium one. If you didn't, please watch that one and come back to this one. But I talked about why there's so many thyroid issues, and it's also because of the birth control pill that was introduced in 1960. Men will start out low in copper, and then they'll start mobilizing that huge amount of copper storage in their tissues from mothers using birth control pills that was maternal dumped into them. and the symptoms of which are insomnia, and hideous anxiety, sometimes headaches, all kinds of depression, all kinds of problems when that copper starts mobilizing. So it really does take us about 5 or 6 of the hair tissue analysis that we would do about every 2 to 3 months, depending on your metabolic type, to see and using the supplements exactly as the lab tells you to do so without using a ton of other stuff or not using them as they tell you. And then we start to mobilize that copper, which is really going to be a problem for you in terms of behavior and mood stabilization. But it's also going to help you with the ability to be able to send signals because copper is very conducive, right? And aluminum will also put you into a situation where you start having problems with your synapses and you may start acquiring a lot of yeast in your body, on your toes, in your mouth, as thrush and other things like that. So that's where I'm really reading for the psychological pattern. Everybody has one. There's no shame in the game. But it's so much more effective to use hair tissue mineral analysis, which you can do through the mail, except in New York, than it is to use blood serum tests for 90% of incidences for people. Now, lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about animal communication doesn't mean that we say, go to the door, right? We think, go to the door, I'm going to go, or we think I'm going to leave, or we think I'm coming home now. There's an excellent book out by Rupert Sheldrake, talks about dogs who know when their owners come home. That's a really interesting book you might want to look at. Rupert Sheldrake is an amazing individual. That's a pretty well-worn word, but he's just phenomenally bright and intelligent and intuitive, and he's really respected. So I think that there's a lot of important things there. So the last thing before I leave today, because I'm trying not to make this a 20-minute, is cryptids. Yes, I do believe in cryptids. Yes, I've actually seen a cryptid. Yes, they are real. You don't have to believe in them. Certainly not forcing it down anybody's throat here. But cryptids are what you've talked about, what we've heard talked about with Sasquatch, Bigfoot. A lot of people have said, I sighted Bigfoot for sure, big hairy man running through the forest. Let me take a drink here. My throat's getting dry. Sasquatch, Bigfoot. There's also YouTube channels which may or may not be accurate, right? They may or may not be, nonfiction, but they talk about different kinds of beings that are part wolf or part moth or part whatever. Who knows about that? I don't know. But then there's also the native lore about Wendigo. And Wendigo is involved and has been involved a few times on some really major storms here in northeast Minnesota. That I feel very certain of. Most people that tell their lore, their stories, their shares about cryptids and close interactions with them will tell you that they felt that they had no empathy at all. But you got to remember that in the last 200 years, people have been taking injections, which has changed our brains. It has basically, as I prophesized way back in 2010 and before, they are trying to comport man with humans, excuse me, let me change that. Cancel. Retrofitting the human with the machine. And that's what's really going on right now because, instead of just replacing you, wiping you all out with radiation, fire, or flood, as the tales go, you'll see incidents of that with the mud floods. You'll see that we had the free energy with all the different narratives that have been, covered up. They're basically going to use you in a different way. Tracking, training, targeting, right? The people that comply are going to be able to live in, like they're lined cities. There's different places where they'll be beautiful and full of nature, but you'll live like a very caged animal. And I don't care to live like that. I care to live as free as possible. And, that was always my goal in life. And that's why I lived in the Santa Cruz and Los Gatos Mountains until, the age of my 40s. I didn't realize it was going to be so different living in Minnesota. And it was okay having our own home, but not quite the same living in an apartment for sure. So that's what I had to share today. Everyone animal communicates. It's another beautiful skill that you have inside of yourself. The more that you can optimize your brain and your body and your blood flow and drink lots of water, get good sleep, because your brain does a flush cycle which even the NIH, the National Institute of Health, which is a medical authority for the United States, has put into a review paper just this, or a review article publication just this year, that your brain uses a flush cycle to clean itself out, detoxify. So you need to have the water in the first place and not just Mountain Dew, Dunkin' Donuts coffee, and soft drinks and caffeine and then wine at night. And I think I got a couple sips in there. I think I got a glass in of water. And that's why sometimes you might want to use something that's got a measurement of ounces on it. Make sure you finish that by the end of the day, which is things I was teaching my clients 34 years ago, and I still do. So I hope you're doing well. I want to thank you again for supporting me. I really appreciate the love. I need the connection. You need the connection. I'm here because my understanding is that as of 2025, most of what you see on media is going to be artificial intelligence. It is artificial intelligence, the picture behind me, which I generate on Discord on Midjourney. But what I'm bringing you is 63 years of a real, authentic, honest, trustworthy individual that you can build trust with over time. And that's why I'm going to be available to answer the questions, which is what I've been doing actually for quite a few people. So I hope you're doing well and you have a wonderful evening wherever you are. Let me know where you are in the comments. Let me know what you think about cryptids, because we don't all have to believe in that, right? Or if you've seen one. Let me know what you think if you've had an experience with animal communication. I'd love to hear it. And I have so much more for you. This is just putting our toe in the water. We haven't even started to go, but this is some foundation, animal communication, psychic medium, readings, wellness. We'll do some thyroid. We'll do some detoxification. We're going to go do a lot about HTMA and why it's so important. And we talked a little bit about cryptopyrrole, but we'll talk more about that. Everyone should at least get one in their lifetime to see if they've got a tendency to be excreting extremely essential elements for yourself. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.